Alright, I don't usually start off with the fly and the vise, but just to show you, we're going to be tying a standard clouser, but I'm going to cover a couple other options and I'll show you here. So it fishes like this. This is inverted, but we're going to tie it like this. So if you have a rotary vise, I'm going to use the rotary feature on my vise. When I come to this part up top, you can definitely tie that top color hair in on the underneath side. It's just a little bit more tricky. So anyhow, I'll take that out. So we're going to cover also how to do the bend back, which is simply this here. And this is more for a bass style fishing if if you got a lot of weeds and stuff. And so we'll cover on how to get your hook to go that way. It's actually pretty simple. And as well as adding a flash throat, like so. So when it's fishing, you get a little flash throat underneath. We're going to cover on how to do that too. So, that being said, let me get a hook out here. I'll show you in just a second. Sorry, I should have had one out already. Now, there's two ways to do the bend back on the hook. You can actually bend it before you tie it, or you can bend it after you tie it. If you're going to tie these and sell them, I recommend bending it first, just to make sure that you have them equal, kind of for quality control. If you're just bending them, if you're going to do it to fish it, then I'd say bend it last, because you're not going to care as much as maybe a potential customer or something. Let me adjust my camera just a little bit there. Cool. So what I have in the vise here is a TMC. Can you see that? There we go. TMC 5263 size 4. What I like to look for on hooks for clousers is they have like a ×3 long or a ×4 long and ×5 long. And that just means simply you have a nice long shank to work with. And before we actually get started, I'll show you here real quick too. The thread I'm going to be using is GSP 100. I recommend 100 to 120, 150, somewhere in there. Just so that way you can get some really nice, good, strong torque. Right, you're also going to want to have some super glue on hand. And first off, we're going to kind of do a measurement. Usually I use my bodkin, but these eyes get set back a little far. So you want to make sure you have a Sharpie, or you can eyeball it if you want. I like to have a Sharpie just so that I stay consistent. The dumbbell eyes I'm using are just lead painted large dumbbell eyes. These ones are in white. Obviously you can do this pattern in just a ton of colors. So we'll kind of get rolling here. So let me get this in my hand correctly so you can see it. So what I like to do to get my measurement is line up the dumbbell eye so that it lines up right behind the eye. And whether it's a straight eye or down eye, it doesn't seem to matter too much. But excuse me. So anyway, I like to line it up like that, and then I'll come and I'll take my marker and I'll mark the shank where that eye ends, right there. I'm going to make it a little bigger so you guys can see it. And that's just going to let me know how far I'm going to start my thread back, or where I'm going to stop my thread going back to kind of build this little bump to help seat the eyes. And I'm losing my eyes again. I always want to roll under my camera. So what we're going to do is I'm going to choke up my thread. There we go. I'm going to start my thread about a bodkin width or so behind the eye, maybe 2. I'm just going to kind of wrap back. Now with this GSP, it's a little slippery when you first start. And I'm going to take that thread all the way back to my mark, or partially cover up my mark. Now when you're cutting this GSP, you need to kind of pull it tight and use really sharp scissors, because it can be really tough to cut. It'll end up kind of fraying out on you a little bit if your scissors aren't sharp, kind of like that, and you'll just have to keep kind of whacking away at it till you get it to snip off. You can also use a razor blade if you're careful. Razor blades work really well. So next what I want to do is create a little bump of thread, and I'm just going to do that by putting a dozen or so wraps of GSP just kind of on each other right there to build up a bump, and that's just going to help me keep from sliding or from the beads sliding off to the back. Now this part's going to be a little tricky for me to get on camera, so I'm going to kind of see if I can turn it sideways. I'm going to hold that bead in place, I'm going to wrap over and across like this. Whoop. I know that's a little tough to see. So I'm going to just kind of hold it in place. Get it seated right on that bump. I'm going to do 3 kind of diagonally coming from the lower left to the upper right and across like that. And I'm going to kind of turn these eyes around. I know you can't see that. And come from the lower left to the upper right. So it's sitting like that. Oh, my vise kind of let loose on my... There we go. Now we're going to do this again a few times. Once you have that done a few times, I'm going to build a little thread button right in front. Okay, and now I'm going to do this again. Now you don't have to crank down on at this part doing that, and I'll show you why in a second, at least the way I do it. So we're going to get a nice little thread base going there. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do a figure 8 around the eyes with our thread staying on top of the shank, but below the eyes. So from the top view, it's going to look like this, around. From the bottom view, oh, I don't know if I've ever done it from the bottom view. From the bottom view, it's going to look like this. Okay. Yep. Now, once you've done that, 10 times, dozen times, I take my bobbin and I'm going to line it up straight with the shank, and I'm just going to pull. And that's one of the reasons I really like GSP here, because this thread won't snap. And you can see how that's really tightening up those eyes. And now I'm going to put a few wraps in the front. And I'm going to do the same process again. I'm going to crisscross a few times, crisscross a few times. And then I'm going to wrap up underneath. Line it up with the front and pull. And that, when you second time you do that, that's really going to help lock those eyes in place. Put a few wraps in front. And now what I like to do, just to make sure it doesn't come out and you don't have to like just load it with thread, is I'll take my super glue and I'll just put a little dab right on top of the eyes and let that start to soak down. And then you can always just kind of wrap these up again. Kind of like so. Okay, cool. We're going to start our thread on the front side of this pattern, and I'm going to bring my thread up to right about where I started. Sorry, my nose is running a little bit. It dropped in temperature quite a bit in the last few days. So we're going to do this with bucktail. That's what the Clouser's made out of. You can do really whatever color combination you want if you're fishing saltwater. I mean, pinks and blues and purples. I mean, geez. For bass, you can do olive and chartreuse. I mean, you can really get creative here, whatever you want. Try to mimic the kind of the shad colors in your area. So we're going to do the bottom of the fly first, which is this upper part. This is going to be the bottom of the fly. And what I like to do here is just find some bucktail that's going to be to the desirable length. I know if you tie streamers or if you've tied other streamers, they say use certain parts of the bucktail. For the Clouser, I don't find that to be quite so necessary. So if I can get my bucktail worked out, what I like to do and how I like to measure it out is I'll take my bucktail, I'll pinch it, I'll twist it a little bit so it kind of comes into a rope a little bit, just so it's not all frayed out, and I'll line it up on the bottom side of the shank. And what I'm looking for is that hair covers about a third of this gap, and I'm probably just a touch light there. So I'll do it again, twist, line it up. Yeah, maybe just a tad heavy, but I'll go with that because we're gonna pull some of this out. Go ahead and clip that little clump off. Then we got to clean it. And the way I like to clean it is I'll pinch it up towards the tips. I'll take my right thumb, right index, and just pull any of the short stuff out that I can get. And I'm going to do that again and get some more. Then I'll take my index finger and just kind of go through there. You might see some start to fly. You'll see some of this shorter stuff start to pop out. Just grab it, pull it out. If you don't do this part, it can kind of mess mess up the front of your fly towards the nose. And then I'll switch directions and take a look to see if I have any hairs that are super out of whack there. And these are actually pretty good. And there's a couple there that I know I don't want, but they're just shorter ones. Okay, so I like to have my clouser about 1.5 times the length of the shank of the hook. So I can kind of line this up here. You know, that's probably just over 1. So I'm just going to add a little bit to it. And that's probably a little closer to 2. You can go 2. That's fine. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch that like so. I'm going to take my scissors, come up at an angle, so we're cutting kind of at a 45-degree angle like so. And I'm going to lay this down. I think I cut that just a little bit long. Lay that down kind of on the front part of the hook. You can also use, if you've got a down die, you can use that as kind of a gauge as to cutting it at an angle. There we go. Now with a real loose wrap, I'm going to kind of come in and grab that, and I'm just going to kind of keep doing loose wraps here for a minute until I start working my way back. Now when I get towards that eye and I've already caught everything, caught all that hair, and I'm going to really pull down tight on that. Okay, and now you can kind of roll back front. Take your thread back towards the front, really nice and tight. Okay, and I'm going to bring my thread underneath the eye, up and over, come right on top on the back side, right behind those dumbbell eyes, get it up nice and tight, and I'm just going to start doing a couple tight wraps there. Now you can see how it's sitting. I'm going to wet my fingers just a little bit to kind of keep all this together in a clump. And now I'm going to kind of loosely spiral wrap this back a little bit, about halfway to the hook point. And I'm going to take my bobbin and I'm going to pull down nice and tight, and now I'm going to advance that forward kind of with touching turns, nice and tight touching turns, until I get right behind that eye. And then for durability purposes, I like to super glue this part too. Just run it up all along there. And I'm not afraid to use glue on streamers, especially if you want them to last. So anyway, now the one thing we don't want to do is cross our thread up and over this front part here, because that's going to cross over the hair, and it's going to look a little squirrely if we do so. Next, what I want to do is I want to get my crystal flash. I'm going to be using just some UV pearl ultraviolet crystal flash, and I'm going to get about 3 strands. Now these are all kind of out of whack here. Let me get them. I know you're probably doing the same thing too if you're following along, which is cool. So if I can just kind of get 3 that are somewhat similar, perfect. All right. So I'm going to get my 3 strands. I'm going to line up the one end so that they're roughly the same length. This doesn't have to be perfect. If you've got them full length pieces, I'm going to take that. I'm going to fold it over in half. Make sure it's in half, and I'm going to like that. I'm going to pinch it in the middle. Then I'm going to pinch just down below my fingers to form a loop out of those strands. Bring my scissors in, cut those in half, and now I can actually take 3 of these strands away and save them for another fly. We don't need. I mean, you can add them all if you want to, but I don't find that it's necessary. So to tie these in, I'm going to kind of do the same thing. I'm going to find the center point. I'm going to find the center point of the crystal flash, and I'm going to bring it down underneath my thread, lift it up, straight up, so that my flash is pretty much lined up all up top. I'm going to pull my flash forward and to the front, and I'm going to make a few wraps right over that crystal flash, and I'm going to gently pull down, and when you do that, it's going to kind of naturally divide them. And then what I can do is I can bring one side parallel with the side and put a wrap in, and I kind of want them down towards the hook shank so that they're more along the center line. If you do it up here, that flash is going to be on the bottom of your fly. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. One wrap. I'm going to do just a few loose wraps, back just a little bit, and tighten that up to behind the eye. So if we're doing the basic Clouser minnow, we're actually 2/3 of the way done here. What I'm going to do though, I'm going to add a little flash throat. So if you don't want to add a flash throat, just skip this part and move forward for a few minutes. So a flash throat, I'm going to be using a Flashabou dubbing. This is sort of like that old school Christmas tinsel, you know, Grandma used to have on the tree. And we don't need a whole lot. We really don't need a whole lot here. So I'm going to pull out a clump and kind of make sure they're all running the same direction. Okay, and that might even be just a little bit heavy. I'm going to kind of half that, I think. Okay, and the easy way to do this is just lay this right on top, put a loose wrap over. I'm going to do 2. I'm going to center it where I want it. I like my longer fibers on the bottom. Then I'm just going to fold the rest of that over and put, you got to get that thread up right behind those dumbbell eyes to do this and make it look nice. Now, fold it over, put a wrap in. I'm going to do 2 wraps right behind the eye. And there you go. You can use you could use red crystal flash, you could use feathers to do this, regular dubbing. You can really get creative here. So that's kind of what I like to do. So next, I'm going to bring my thread underneath the eyes so that we're not crossing over the top here. I'm going to bring my thread up front, and I'm going to work it back towards the front. And now I'm going to get my secondary color, which is going to be the top of the fly. And for this, I'm just going to go with chartreuse. It's kind of a traditional bass color. Again, if you're, however you're fishing these or where you're fishing them, load it up with pink, purple, whatever. If you're going to run multiple colors, just make sure your lighter color's on the bottom side, because that's just kind of typically how fish look, right? Their bellies are wider or lighter than the top. So next, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get my clump. I'm going to see that if it fills about 1/3 of that gap, and that's probably just a little bit heavier than I want, but that's all right. We're going to thin this down, so that'll work. And I'll clip that little clump off. We're going to clean this the same exact way. I'm just going to pinch it up here, pull anything out, just kind of move my fingers around, do it twice, take my index finger, whack it. Well, that's staying pretty clean there. That's pretty good. And then I'm going to kind of hold it towards the back and see if I've got anything real super funky coming out of there, and I don't. Well, usually you can almost always find that. So anyhow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up to make sure that these tips at the tail are about even, and they are. And I'll find my distance, because I want it to be my distance is going to be right from the back of the eye, and have the tips kind of feather in to the back of the fly. So I'm going to start just like that, and I've got my distance. Now I'm going to turn my vise over here, and I'm going to do the same thing. Kind of make a 45-degree cut, roughly. I'm going to have to do that again. I always find that I end up moving my fingers and messing it up. So if you're doing that, don't worry about it. Now I'm going to line those up right behind. Well, it's not working for me right there. That's a little better. Right behind the eye. I'm just going to, again, do the same thing. Just kind of use some loose wraps to capture it all. When I get to the eyes, I'm going to torque that thing down. I'm going to lose some hair here, and that's okay. Now I can really torque this guy, and I'm going to bring that thread all the way back forward. Really tight turns here. That's why I like using GSP. You could totally use 140 or 210 denier thread if you want to. I really like GSP for streamers and other flies working with hair. Now I'm going to wrap that thread back and forth, tying up all those loose ends. And you may have to do this a few times, so if your nose ends up being just a little bit on the bigger side here, don't worry about it too much. And one reason you want to kind of cut those at an angle is you can see it helps give this cone shape to the nose. If you cut it off straight, you'll see a cutoff point in there, and it can make it really difficult for tying the hair in. So that's looking pretty good. I'm going to get my thread back to the eyes. Now I'm able to whip finish, and for my whip finishing, I like to probably put 4 to 5 whip finishes in, kind of right behind the eyes. Pull that sucker tight, and I'm going to do it twice. And on the second one, I try to level things out a little bit to make sure it stays kind of in a cone shape. Pull that guy tight, pull it real tight, and I can come in. And you don't have to clip either with this, with your thread. You can just open that scissor up and just push through a little bit, and that works really well too. Now, I'm going to glue this, but before I glue that, I'm going to show you how to do the bend back portion of that. Whoop. So, when you're done, your clouser should look something like this. Whoop. The top hair sticking out a little bit, but that's okay. When it's wet, it's all going to line out and be like this, so it's no big deal. So, when you do, where's my pliers? I just had them. There they are. So when you do the bend back portion of this, what we're looking to do is get the point of this hook to be down here and parallel with the, oops, sorry, I know I'm on a camera there. Get the point of this hook to be down and parallel with the eye. So you can come in and take your pliers and just kind of get up right in behind there. Okay. And sometimes it's easier to do it with 2 pliers, but you just hold on, clamp real tight, and you're going to bend that down kind of around. So you'll see what happens when you do that is the hook bends like this. I'll put it back in the vise real quick so you can kind of line it out for you. So now you have this kind of bent hook, and when you run your bodkin along there, you can see how the hook point basically lines up pretty close with the eye. Now what this is going to allow you to do is chuck this thing into some serious weeds. Weeds, moss, just absolute filth in the ponds. And bass are in there and you get tired of getting hung up. So you can do this bend back on a lot of simple streamers like this. And you can just toss this baby in there and just have it be super clean. This thing is like 98% effective coming out of that mess clean. And so the idea is when it's down there, all your material is compressing like so, and it's covering that hook point. So all your moss and algae and everything is sliding right over the top of that. And usually when I pull some out, it's getting stuck on the eye, not on the hook. And then obviously if a bass bites it, when his lips come on there and bite it, it's like, kapow, there's that hook. So there you go. There is the Clouser Minnow with the bend back option and a flash throat option. And you can leave the bend back and the flash throat out and just go straight for it and tie your regular Clouser, and that's cool too. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked the video, please subscribe and share. If you're not a part of our Facebook group, Fly Tying for Beginners, please check that out. Just fill out the questions. That unlocks the door, gets you in. We do classes and all kinds of fun stuff. It's a great little group, and we hope to see you there. Take care, everybody.